everyone and welcome back to my channel, Beth Chats Books. Now today I am going to do my 2 years on Booktube Q&A answers video. So there wasn't that many questions, but two lovely ladies asked me a good few questions, so I'm just going to answer them. Obviously I didn't really give much notice about the Q&A, so I'm not that bothered that the response wasn't as numerous as the very first one I did on my first year on Booktube. I also understand that after a long time on Booktube you kind of sometimes get lost because other channels are constantly popping up, and I know a good many booktubers, fantastic amazing booktubers who have similar numbers to me after being on Booktube for a similar amount of time to me, so those things don't really matter to me. And these beautiful lovely ladies have been with me from the beginning of my journey and they've asked me some fantastic questions, so without further ado I'm just going to answer them for you now. So one of my best Booktube friends, Jasmine over at Jasmine's Reads, which obviously I'll link down below, but she's huge now, so I'm pretty sure you guys all know about her, and if you don't, then where have you been? Go and check her out down below, okay? So she's asked me some questions, so I'm going to answer them. So the first one she asked me is, what's your favourite perfume? So I spent 20 minutes Googling to find the exact bottle that I remember from many years ago that me and my sister kind of fought over. It was my sister's perfume, but I really enjoyed it, so I stole it from her. And I finally found it, and it's the Calvin Klein Euphoria. So that it's been out a very long time now. I think it was 2008 or 2009 it first came out. Something, I think so. I don't know why that's popped in my head, but I think it is really old. And I feel like it was a long time ago when I was kind of just on that teenage periphery and I wanted to try perfume. So I am not that well versed in feminine perfumes. And I don't want you guys to think that's because I'm a stinky lady. It's just because perfume was always very expensive. So I usually ask my stepdad every Christmas to get me some perfume, and then he usually goes with some really fun gift sets. So in the past I've had kind of Kylie Minogue, Britney Spears, Beyonce style perfume, because obviously they're fun. Gift sets are always on offer around Christmas, and some of the more feminine smells that I kind of like are quite expensive, and it's not really appropriate to ask for that as a Christmas present. So I never really treat myself to perfume, and bad as it sounds, in past relationships when they've said, what do you want for Christmas kind of thing, I've always said books. So maybe I should try some more perfumes, but obviously you guys understand that books rule everything, so there's that. And then the next question she asked me is, what's your favourite literary quote? Again, I spent hours and hours and hours trying to search for quotes. Didn't really work out very well, and I'm one of these people that really hates trawling back through books, so I have so many books that I've enjoyed. I recently really enjoyed Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, which I will talk a little bit more about in my Goodreads Summer Readathon wrap-up part 2, which will be coming out soon. But that was very quotable, but I just couldn't find the essence of a quote that I really enjoyed. I've recently been rereading Little Women series, and there's some really lovely kind of moral quotes in there as well. So I just thought I'd kind of say some books that are quotable as well. I recently read And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. Very quotable all the way through. So there are a few books that I think have some great quotes in them, but I couldn't find any in time for this video, sorry. So I'm working on that question. That's a question in progress, Jasmine, I'm afraid. And then another of her questions was, where do you want to travel to most in the world? So me and Paul have our heart set on, my boyfriend Paul. We really want to go to Japan. Now I got massive jealousy, envy, holiday envy, I guess you could call it, / fall in love with this idea when I saw that Jen Campbell, when she got married, I think it was last year, I want to say it was last year now, she kind of honeymooned in Japan, and I'd never really considered Japan before, or it never really been on my radar, but she showed some really beautiful pictures on her Instagram of the countryside in Japan. So Paul, my boyfriend's really interested in the idea of not going to somewhere like Tokyo, which is very oversaturated, but he would like to go to some lesser known cities. And I said I'd be really interested in seeing some of the countryside. I didn't really realise how beautiful some parts of Japan were. So it's kind of become our kind of bucket list place to go at the moment. So there's loads of other places I'd really love to go. In particular, I'd really love to go to India, and I want to visit some parts of South America and kind of the Caribbean. But yeah, Japan's kind of at the moment somewhere that we'd really like to do a considerable visit to. And then the last one, when can we meet up for a chat and a bottle of red wine? Any day, any time, anytime. So what we're hopefully doing is eventually we're going to try and arrange a meet-up. So Matthew from MCS Books, Shazza from Hooked on Books, and Jasmine from Jasmine's Reads, we kind of conglomerated a friendship from the beginning. We all started at similar times, and we were all really supportive at the beginning of each other's channel, and we've always had a chat since. And we went through a phase where we kind of petered out a little bit, but that's because everyone's so busy. It's not because we don't care about each other. So we've been floating around since the dawn of time, the idea of meeting up. But with me and Jasmine, we met up many moons ago now in Preston, before she went to Leicester. And I met up with her mum, who was a beautiful human. And we had a really good time. And we really should meet for a bottle of wine and do a catch-up again. So whenever, you know, girl, just message me. We can arrange that any day. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for asking me these questions. I really, really appreciated it. And now I'm going to answer some questions from Anissa Jackson. So she's always been really, really supportive of my channel. I'll link her down below. She's always had such really interesting things to say, and her questions are so interesting. So it's an absolute pleasure to answer them for you. So the first one is, when did you begin actively incorporating feminism into your life? Now, I found this such a fascinating question because I've always kind of, I think since feminism came on my radar, which I would say was towards the end of high school and college, and definitely more prominent towards the beginning of my university kind of career or experience. And I met a lot of people who kind of made feminism seem quite... they were very passionate about feminism and made it come across as very intense. And I really struggled with that because I kind of got a bad perception of feminism at first, because a lot of women were almost slating other women for not actively being feminist and for not fighting the cause and blah, blah, blah. And then when you start your university degree, especially if you do subjects like I did, like English and history, you learn all about kind of where our rights of women has come from, how far they progressed or not progressed. And it's kind of race, gender and sexuality are big signposts throughout your entire history or your English degree. So I kind of found it a bit scary and intimidating, but I would say in the last couple of years that I have actively incorporated feminism into my sense of being, but I have a very holistic view of feminism. So to me, feminism incorporates men's mental health, men's rights as well, paternity rights, and I'm kind of going for an equality. That's my viewpoint. It's kind of there, but obviously as a woman it's very difficult to not go through life and acknowledge the hindrances that as women we are given in terms of what our pay is compared to men. And in terms of many other things, it's very difficult. You go through life and, you know, just day-to-day life at work, I'll be openly patronised by people because I'm a woman. So I will be called at work darling, love, and things that I don't personally feel great or comfortable being called, but we live still in a kind of misogynistic world where that's acceptable. So yeah, I would definitely say in the last couple of years, I've kind of jumped on board more with it and embraced it. But like I said, my model is very much a holistic model of that. And then the second question is, what do you miss about your undergraduate uni degree and the experience? So I really miss, in English, once a week we were given a book, and then we were probably given academic material to read alongside it. And then we would have what you call a seminar, which is where you kind of discuss that material with the rest of your classmates. Now to me that became like a book club, and I loved and I got so excited every week, especially if I read the book and really loved it. And equally as much if I finally did read the book that week, because a lot of times I never really got round to a lot of the reading because it's so exhaustive. If I read it and I didn't like it, I loved it because everybody is so equally passionate, either loving it or hating it. that you can get a really rich discussion going. And that's something I miss, because in the real world, when you go back to your home and you finish your degree, you don't really have that same passion and that same kind of carved out space and time in your week to really have an in-depth, intellectual, stimulating conversation about literature. And I really miss that. I miss being able to really go with what I feel and really articulate all my thoughts. And a lot of the time I think the tutors really enjoyed it, because I was one of the most enthusiastic in most of my classes. I always had something to say, whereas you get a few sheep in the background or little quiet mice who don't want to say much. And I loved that. I loved kind of going head to head with someone who had a completely different opinion than me, and you both had that mutual respect for each other's opinion, but you're kind of playing devil's advocate with each other's opinion. And I loved that that whole exchange. So I do really miss that. And then the next question, do you plan on going to grad school? So I would love to go and do a postgraduate degree. I don't know when that would be. That might be later on in my life if I really have a compulsion to do it. At the moment I'm doing an online counselling course, which I would have to do a further course for and look into volunteering. So at the moment I'm kind of still loosely studying. But yeah, I would love to have carried on with my English and history, but it was very demanding, and I know that a postgrad would be ridiculously demanding, and it would be something I think that I would have to go back to university in that sense, because I've noticed with this counselling course, monitoring your own education while you're at home and you have work and you have all the other demands of life is very difficult for me to control myself and to carve out time in the week. So I know that if I was going to do something as mammoth as a postgraduate degree, I would have to fully go back to university and travel to uni so that I could actually carve out that time and have that support system there. But yeah, it's something I'd definitely love to do. Just haven't figured out when and what it will be yet. And then the next question, are there any specific books that you read years ago but you still actively think about? So I've put down here Perfume by Patrick Suskind, because it's just so visceral. It's about a guy who kind of keeps killing people, especially virgins, in the hope of kind of creating the perfect smell of a virgin. So there's a lot of very visceral descriptions of smell in the book. It's quite disturbing at some points, but you have this morbid interest. It's really hard to describe. But Simon from Savage Reads was recently discussing this book with his mum, and his mum kind of articulated it quite well, that it's a very fascinating read. And that character really sticks with you. The character development's really good. I think a lot of people don't get on with the book because it's slow. Not a lot happens, but you're in that very vivid world. When you're left, you're kind of still morbidly fascinated. It's strange. And then obviously Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, because it's the best kind of thriller plot that I've ever read. It's just core structure was just so well executed for me. The characters were really interesting. Based on the time period of when it was written, sometimes you can get a little bit of like droll characters and a little bit of characters that are almost whiny, and it's very borderline, are we going to have a hysterical woman in this kind of thriller setting? And I think Rebecca really gives you, with the kind of ghost of Rebecca, she's a very strong character. And while the secondary non-named second wife isn't really that strong, there's a really great dynamic between husband, Rebecca, and this second wife that really is done really well, I think. Whereas some other characters I know, for example, I really personally love The Haunting of Hill House, but I know a lot of people find, I think it's Eleanor, the main character, a little bit whiny and a little bit pathetic. So I think Rebecca has the perfect formula to a thriller for me. It's so well articulated that I can remember that most of the specific plot points still, which I think is a really good testament to a clear, concise and perfect kind of thriller structure. And then the last one is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides, purely because I don't know how to describe it, but I literally fell in love with this book, and I hadn't, until I read this book, really fallen in love with a book in terms of I fell head over heels for this book, which sounds really strange because if you read the book, it's not beautiful, it's quite creepy, it's quite haunting, but it's about these girls in I think it's 70s America, And through the lens of these boys, they're kind of obsessed with them, but they're having home life problems, and they're kind of going through mental health, and they end up all committing suicide because it's the virgin suicide. But it was a book that completely hoodwinked me. I completely had no idea what was going to happen. It took me completely on this ride and then left me. And because I'd been so intoxicated by this story, it gave me one of the biggest book hangovers. I just didn't know what to do with myself because I was so ready to know what happens. And it's quite a small book, so I got through it really quickly, just really absorbed into that world, even though it's not what I would call a happy world. But I can appreciate that I'm a mature reader, and I quite sometimes enjoy those worlds that you wouldn't personally ever want to live in yourself, but you're fascinated by. And that was very much. And those girls are very fascinating because you're always from the perspective of an outsider, and you become as besotted as the boys with them in a strange way. So yeah, those books have definitely stayed with me. And then the next question, if you could give young Beth one piece of advice, what would it be? So I thought long and hard about this, and I kind of almost said to myself, I feel like the space I'm in now, there will be a future me to give me advice, because I feel like there's still a lot of things I'm working through. I haven't branched out career-wise, family relationships can only strengthen from here. You know, I still feel like a child in some ways, meandering my way through this adult world. So I've definitely got room to grow and improve. But one thing I would say to young Beth, and one thing that I think has always been something I was self-conscious about, is in my younger years I was very self-conscious about being a reader. I didn't come from a place that's particularly literary or different. I mean, Preston doesn't really have a whole literary spectrum of people or a community to go to, unfortunately. And at school, it was always that battle between being liked, and people would like the personality that wasn't the geek. Everybody will know that cliche that you kind of dumb down your geeky elements at school. Lots of things I didn't go for. Book-related things, librarian roles that I really should have done, and I should have said to myself, you will eventually find a community here on Booktube that will love you for being a book nerd, and there's nothing to be ashamed of, to be intelligent, to want to be stimulated by literature, to be interested in that, and you'll end up going to university and doing a degree related to it that you'll love, and you'll meet kind of fellow people who enjoy it. So I wish that I could have known that reading for me is a strength of my character and not a weakness, and not something that I should ever have been ashamed about. But admittedly, yeah, in my younger years I was a bit ashamed, and I would read at home and I'd read in the car, but around friends and at school I'd try to hide that side of myself, which is a shame, because I think you only realise when you leave school how little school really matters, and the personality and persona you are at school, how little it matters. But obviously at school the social pressures are massive. And then the last one, do you have a preference between plot-driven books or character-driven analysis books? So every single time would be character-driven analysis books. Recently I realised with reading Jack Kerouac's On the Road that if it's literally got no plot at all, and it's got deplorable characters that I don't really care about, it is going to be a dead end for me. I'm just not going to enjoy it. So it does have to have some plot, and I think I've not really appreciated until recently how successful authors have been that I've really enjoyed at creating that plot alongside the character development. So I'm definitely not saying that it's an all or nothing. You definitely need a strong plot, but for me, the key word that you've said there is analysis for me, and I do love a book that I can kind of rip apart, analyse, characters that I can see really develop that might be faulted, but there's meat on the bones that I can kind of play with. I don't really like characters fleetingly introduced. We don't really get any of the backstory, any of their internal monologues and thoughts, and then they're pushed through the plot for a long period of time, because I kind of have a disconnect. I need to find something human in you, whether it's faulted or stilted or there's issues. I need something to be able to carry you along in the story for me and say, yeah, I'm rooting for you, or I can get that, or I'm really interested in what you're going to do next. But yeah, I would say it mainly 9 times out of 10 it will be the character that will really win the book over for me. So thank you so much for asking me those questions as well. Really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that you both took the time to write me those questions, because I think they're so thoughtful and specific, and a lot of effort has gone into them. So they are all my answers to my Q&A. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.